P&Z. This will be my last meeting tonight. So just as a reminder, I'm stepping down, and I thought I'd hang on to this last meeting, and then we'll figure out after a vote of officers, what we do next. But the first thing we wanted to do tonight, John, if you're okay to give maybe an update on where we stand with the nominating committee. I know there's been a lot of good progress. I just thought it'd be interested to everybody hear how much progress we've been making.
Sure. We received a total of, I think, 12 applications, which was great. And we have 8 applicants that we're going to interview, and that's on February 11th and 13th. And then hopefully we'll be ready after that to make our recommendations during the February board meeting. So we're a little later than we had hoped, but with the holidays and whatnot, just needed a little time to get there. So.
Yeah, good. No, I think that sounds great. Any members have any questions at the moment about that process or? Yes, Tammy?
And Rob, oh, go ahead, Tammy.
Tammy,
sorry. John Carter will be trying to get on. I don't see him here. I want to alert the group. Also, he has been requested over and over and over again of applicants to be sent the packets. He did not get a packet. He called me this afternoon to tell me he was having some computer issue, but he would try to get on by phone. So I just want to say that again. We really need to add John Carter to our compulsory plan list. Thank you.
Yeah, Tammy, that's probably a good point. I think the list we typically send out is the committee members only. We don't often include John, thinking that he's already been in the loop on these applicants by the time we get them. So maybe that's something we just update our list as a reminder to make sure Commissioner Carter has that same packet.
Rob, can you please remind everyone how many positions we have open to potentially fill?
Yeah, so at our last count, with Dick and I stepping down this year, we were the only 2 that weren't renewing for the coming year. So that would leave us with 13 regular members. And then we had our 1 associate member also choose not to move on, Tim. So we essentially have 2 full-time members to fill. And then I think we made a decision. Let's see, did we make a decision at our last meeting as how many associates we wanted to consider? I'm gonna have to refer to my notebook. Hold on.
I think we were considering up to 3 as what I recall. Is that?
I would hope so.
That's my recollection as well.
So 2 full-time and 3 associates potentially, and given that we have 8 really great candidates, we should be able to fill all of those should we choose. So.
Yeah, just bear with me, John, just for a second, see if I can at least regurgitate what we last talked about. Hopefully I have the right notebook in my hand. So I'll tell you what, while I'm looking this up, let's talk a little bit about, so tonight, before we have our applicant present, we do need to talk about voting in new officers. And we need some nominations for a chair, vice chair, and secretary. And I will not be part of the vote or part of the nominating process tonight. So just want to try to get that out there. Okay, so the notes from our November meeting, the committee agreed to seek 2 full-time members and 1 associate. If you'll recall, at that meeting, we we wanted to make sure we were giving the nominating committee clear direction, because last year it got a little squirrely where there was a lot of debate, giving the nominating committee a lot of latitude about candidates. And so there was discussion that the committee, while we have the opportunity to fill as many as 3 associate seats, there's also, a lot of people we have to get through on these meetings, a lot of people with comment. And there was some discussion about just not having too many people, being involved. And so that was what the decision we made was 2 full-time members and 1 associate members was our direction to the nominating committee.
Thank you for the refresher, Rob. Appreciate that.
Mike Jennings.
Rob, are we doing officers first?
Yes.
All right, I'd like to nominate John Capilla for chairman.
All right. I guess, do I hear a second on that?
Second.
I'll second that.
Who was that?
Matt.
Oh, Matt. Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Okay, let me, I guess, let's see. Lynn, you have your hand up.
Yes, if John Capula is accepting that nomination, then I to nominate Tammy Petrine as vice chair. Are you accepting that, John?
I accept.
Yeah. So I guess I was just seeing if there was any other candidates being nominated for chair, and then I guess we can then take a vote on that. I just wanted to see if there was any other. All right, hearing none. Do we want to just vote on John and have
Yes.
everybody give me a yes? I'm going to say everybody yes, unless I hear otherwise.
Yes.
Yes.
Thank you, John.
Thank
Okay,
you.
so that's unanimous.
Congratulations.
So
Thank
John,
you. I look forward to serving. Be nice.
Okay, so is it now my turn to nominate, or is there any discussion, or are we taking the vote?
no, I think that was a good for that vote. Any other nominations for vice chair?
I don't know if she would accept, but I'd like to nominate Rebecca.
I'm
I'll second.
honored. I think Tammy would be great.
Well, you both would be great.
Rebecca, does that mean you care not to be recognized as vice? Because we can take votes on this and then just decide after that, but.
Well, I'm not opposed to it, but I do think that, I would second Tammy being the vice, so I don't know how that leaves it.
Okay.
Does Tammy want to do it?
Yes, I will accept.
All right. Do I hear a second on that for Tammy?
I second, Rob.
I'll second
I
it.
thought Rebecca just seconded.
I did.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of Tammy as vice chair, say
Aye.
yay.
Aye.
Yay.
Any nays?
Only nay because I'm going to vote yes for Rebecca, but
Oh,
otherwise I would vote yes for Tammy.
Always the diplomat, Capella.
that will serve you well.
Okay. Last but not least, secretary. Do we hear a nominating person for secretary?
Remind us who our secretary is now.
I believe Michelle is still technically the secretary.
I think so, but I am not in a position to continue that role. So I will be happy to pass it along to someone else.
Could
What's
someone
the role
refresh
of-
my memory on what the duties are of the secretary?
That's a very good question. So I think in the past, the secretary was the one responsible for the meeting minutes. Since we've gone to kind of like the video recording or the recording of the minutes, we've kind of gotten away from that. And you know, and then there really aren't that many other duties there. I mean, Lynn, you really did a Herculean job in getting the website up to speed. I would have thought that was more of a secretarial lead there. So you kind of helped out with that last year. So
It was my pleasure.
and that continues to be very well received, by the way.
Good.
Lynn, would you be willing to be secretary?
Are you nominating me?
Well, only if you would. I don't want to put any more on your plate. And that you did the website, if you
well,
would, that would be fantastic.
Yeah, if it's just a matter of continuing to post the YouTube videos and the meetings that way, and I'll be happy to accept a nomination.
I nominate Lynn Molston.
All right. Do I hear a second?
I'll second.
All right. Thanks, Jared.
Jared,
All in
Lynn,
favor
secretary.
of Lynn being secretary? Say hey. Say aye.
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 Any
Aye.
opposed? All right. Now, of course, Lynn, if John or Tammy are unable to fulfill their duties, you'll be the next one in command. So
Lord help you.
just
Okay.
be aware.
All right.
Okay, listen, I appreciate it, everybody. That's helpful. So John, you and I will coordinate, and I'll transfer everything that I have over to you, and then I'll always be around for additional coordination, whatever's needed. So we'll work on that offline.
Thank you, Rob.
Okay. Any other questions before we run into the application here, the first application tonight, or the only application tonight? All right. So with us tonight, we have a land use application, which is the phase 2 of BXP's Reston Gateway at the Reston Town Center. I know we have a number of individuals for the team. Aaron, we got Mark Looney. So who wants to lead off first?
I'll jump in, Rob.
Okay.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Mark Looney with Cooley, representing BXP. My colleague Aaron Frank is on the phone, senior land use planner in our group. We're also joined by Matt Bonifant from BXP, who's the project manager on this, and then Andrew Kabolka from Gensler, who is the principal architect on the project. So we're pleased to come before you all tonight to offer as an information item an application that was submitted really back last fall, but is now picked up in earnest its staff review process. I'll throw up on the screen for everybody some information about the project, and hopefully we can walk this through relatively quickly if I can get the right screen up. With me a second. You guys see this? Is this the PowerPoint presentation?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay. I've got the development plan up on the screen as well that I can toggle back and forth if we have questions. So just to orient everybody, to the bottom of the page, this is the Dulles Toll Road. The Reston Town Center Metro Station is kind of here in the front. The urban core of Reston Town Center is back up here, sort of in the middle of the screen. Phase 1 of what became the Reston Next project is here in the lower left-hand corner in the foreground. The Fannie Mae headquarters, regional headquarters building is in the corner here. And then the Volkswagen headquarters is over here on the left-hand side. The Skymark residential project, which recently was completed, is in the back, along with a small office building kind of in the back over here. There's appended to the Skymark building, and then hidden behind the Fannie Mae building is a hotel and retail project that will deliver later this year. This was all constructed as phase one. Phase two is encompassed by the 2 red brick office buildings that are in the foreground here, that at the time that we went through the approval process for both phases 1 and 2 back in 2018, the leases were set to run out in the mid-2020s for these 2 office buildings, and they have been leased to a 3-letter agency that I think everybody knows who it is, but nonetheless, a 3-letter agency that we didn't anticipate would extend beyond their current lease. The entrance to the metro station is here. It is all on the south side of Sunset Hills Road, which runs east and west along the frontage of the property. This is Town Center Parkway. The eventual underpass under the Dulles Toll Road would be here. And then Town Center Parkway extends up to the north to provide access into the existing urban core of Town Center. What we'll quickly go over is give you just an update on what's happening with phase 2 of the project, since phase 1 is largely completed at this point, along with the schedule. And I'll come back to that in a second. We'll give you, show you the updates to the overall master plan that are changing as a result of the applications that we have pending before the county now. We've got some more detail around some of the major park spaces that are incorporated into the project. We'll provide an update on the Performing Arts Center parcel that BXP had proffered as an option for the county to receive in lieu of athletic field contributions back with the 2018 approvals, and that the county subsequently elected to receive. And we'll give you some updates with some of the changes that are happening with that. And then finally show you some of the building and massing elements to the project so that you can see how phase 2 will fit in context with phase 1's improvements. Just to go back to the schedule for a second, as I mentioned, the application was submitted back last fall. We've received 1 round of staff comments at this point. We just recently resubmitted the application, and I'll show you some of those updated images this evening, and are going to be receiving in late February, early March, the next round of staff comments. We're tentatively scheduled for a Planning Commission public hearing in late June. We don't yet have a Board of Supervisors hearing date. That's typically set either with a motion from the board for expedited processing, or in the absence of that, once the Planning Commission has concluded its work on the project. Overall, the 2 phases of RTC Next encompass about 22 acres. It was always designed to be a 2-phase project, as I mentioned with the opening slide. The overall project was approved in 2018 and included the development plan for and proffers for the entirety of the project, meaning both phases 1 and 2, and then included a PRC plan for the phase 1 portion, which is on the left-hand side over here, to allow BXP to commence construction of what became the Fannie Mae and Volkswagen headquarters facilities and the Skymark residential building to the north, and the hotel project that sits in the middle. What we are back in for now is to incorporate a PRC plan for phase 2 and to reflect some changes that have been made to the layout of phase 2 since the approval in 2018. So the actual applications that we have pending include a development plan amendment to change essentially 3 elements of the project, a proffer condition amendment to change the proffers for phase 2, and then a PRC plan that would allow for the submission of site plans for the construction of the elements in phase 2. The way we have elected to structure the proffers for phase 2 is that we are effectively amending and restating all of the proffers that were applicable to phase 2 when both phases 1 and phase 2 were approved. So we are bringing forward all of those proffers while deleting elements that are inapplicable to phase 2, meaning they only apply to phase 1, or that are new proffers associated with just the development in phase 2. We are not, as part of this application, amending or changing any of the proffers related to the phase 1 portion of the development, because that is essentially complete at this point. Those proffers remain in full force and effect as it applies to phase 1. So as an example, things related to the future construction of an underpass of Town Center Parkway beneath the Dulles Toll Road remain enforceable and applicable as to phase 1. But phase 2 will have its own set of standalone proffers that largely mirror those of phase 1, minus, as I said, things that are applicable only to phase 1, and plus any new proffers that would be applicable just to phase 2. So just sort of setting out what's in the application, that's how it is structured. To go back in time a little bit, one of the elements that was important as we talked about phase 1 and phase 2's original approval was how we were linking this development to both the then new, or actually not even new, the then under construction Reston Town Center Metro Station with the existing urban core of Town Center. And you'll notice that what the design anticipated and promoted was essentially a new grid of vehicular and pedestrian improvements that would facilitate enhanced access in between the metro station and the urban core of Town Center, while extending the urban fabric that the Town Center represents southward down towards the metro station. So in terms of vehicular access, we had existing Town Center Parkway running north and south. We added, as part of phase 1, and some of you may have already utilized it, a pedestrian connection at Explorer Street here that connects via an elevated bridge over the W&OD Trail and brings pedestrians down into RTC Next. And when the hotel is completed and the road opened up fully down through here, will allow for direct pedestrian connection from the metro station into the urban core and vice versa. And then we proposed a new vehicular connection that would extend Library Street southbound over top of the W&OD Trail and then intersecting with Sunset Hills Road. And that connection was to be provided in lieu of a pedestrian and then future vehicular connection in between the two Discovery Square office buildings here, where there is today a pedestrian connection here, but that was proffered as part of the original urban core of Town Center to be converted from a pedestrian connection into a vehicular connection once certain development thresholds were met. And so effectively what we did with the RTC Next approval here was to ensure that this always remains a pedestrian connection, and we added a vehicular and pedestrian connection at Library Street to have it terminate into Sunset Hills Road to the north. And so we have continuing proffers as part of this phase 2 that carry this obligation forward, subject to certain conditions. With respect to sort of other elements of the application, we had then and have now a proffered Central Park that runs north-south through the middle of the RTC Next development, proffers for green building certifications on all buildings, vegetated roofs and stormwater harvesting on all of the buildings in phase 2. We had proffered then and are proffering now under certain conditions to establish an above grade connection directly out of the pedestrian bridge coming from the metro station above Sunset Hills Road and then drop down into the middle of the development. So if I go back to the first slide, effectively what we would do is tap into this elevated connection here, go across Sunset Hills Road, and then drop it down into the middle of the proposed development in phase 2. And then we also, as part of this application, and I'll get into this in a little bit more detail, are relocating the county's preferred or preference for the proffering of land for a future performing arts center within this block to make it more cohesive and integrated into the central park that is in the middle of the development here, while also allowing for office development closer to the metro station in lieu of where the was proffered. And then we're carrying forward the commitment for workforce dwelling units at a total of 16%. In concert with the comprehensive plan's recommendations for a tiered system to the provision of WDUs. This is the original phase 1 and phase 2 approved plan from 2018. So we divided it into development blocks. Blocks A, B, C, and D were part of phase 1. The phase 1 line was on the west side of Central Park, reflective of where the existing office building lease limits were. Said another way, we couldn't construct the Central Park until phase 2 because the 3-letter agency was leasing all of the property up to the western boundary of that Central Park. And so we had to wait until that lease terminated, the tenant vacated, and we were able to redevelop those existing buildings before the Central Park could be provided. Phase 2 was broken into 4 blocks. Similarly, Block J was the location of where we offered to provide land for the future performing arts center that would be developed, operated, and programmed by the county or its designee. Block G was intended to be a mixed-use block, as were blocks E and F, residential to the back, office to the front. You'll notice with this approval that this east-west spine road here terminated on the east side of the park and went due north. It did not cut across Block G, and that's one of the elements that is changing with this plan. And you'll notice that Block F and Block J were rather skinny in relation to Blocks E and Blocks G, and that also is changing as part of this plan. So then as we fast forward and we focus on what's happening with the amendment, so this is the element of the application that represents the development plan amendment, meaning we are modifying the underlying development plan applicable to the property. The 3 changes that we are making are: 1, we are extending this spine road through Block G to create smaller development blocks that allow us to phase construction of blocks G1 and G2. We are pushing this north-south road here a little bit farther to the west in order to make Block F slightly larger and Block E slightly smaller. Same thing with Block G. It gets a little bit smaller and Block J grows a little bit bigger to enable all of these blocks to be more right-sized in terms of the amount of development that is programmed for each of them. And then finally, we are in consultation with the supervisor's office and others at the county, switching the future location of the Performing Arts Center from Block J over to Block G2 to make it better integrated with the Central Park component and to make it closer to the above ground connection coming across from the metro station into the Central Park area. So with respect to the development plan, other than adjusting some of the square footages and unit totals reflecting these changes in configuration, those are the only three elements that are changing with the development plan amendment that is part of this application. We then have a PRC plan layered in on top of that to implement all of these changes in phase 2. Just to show you a side-by-side comparison between the original approved application and the proposed plan, you can see the road extension through Block G here, carried over here. We've widened out Block F to make it a little bit bigger, Block E a little bit smaller, and grown Block J at the same time. Once we stitch together phase 1 and phase 2, we get to a point where we've got about 500 units in phase 1, twice that number in phase 2. We have slightly less office space in phase 2 than we have in phase 1. We don't have a hotel programmed with phase 2, and we've got, call it 20% more ground floor uses, which are where you see these kind of shaded areas in phase 2 than we did at the time that we got the approvals, or excuse me, then we've sort of reconfigured it to where we're adjusting the square footages and unit totals based on these reconfigurations. And I'll show you a comparison a little bit later on some of those elements as well. In the most recent submission that we made to staff, we made a couple of adjustments to the land plan based on their comments. So I'm going to point out what's changed from the first submission to the second submission in the plan. These are not all of the changes, but these are the major changes. If I go back one slide, you'll see on Block F, this is the future extension of Library Street, connecting the urban core down to Sunset Hills Road. You'll notice on this plan that there is a loading and garage entries along Library Street and no loading or garage entries along this north-south connection here. When we then go to the resubmission to staff, we've kind of flip-flopped that, and we've got one garage entry here, and we've got a loading and garage entry along this internal street, reflective of the fact that this is more of a service street, whereas this, they anticipate at the staff level, will be more of a major north-south connection between the urban core and Sunset Hills Road. And so we wanted to limit the number of curb cuts and loading areas that would come in along Library Street. Similarly, if we go back to this plan, we had a garage entry here to be able to service Block J. And with this new plan, based on some comments, we're still showing this as an option here, but we actually have two options for Block J, one of which would put all of the loading and parking entry on this side and keeping this option where we're splitting the two. The ground floor uses would be limited based on these changes to the major north-south, or excuse me, east-west spine road coming across the block here, along with coming in off of the park over here. You'll notice that in this particular plan, we're not programming the elements of the future performing arts center. I'll show this in a little bit more detail as we go. We're in the process of gathering some information from the county and from some of its stakeholders about exactly how they'd like to lay this out internally. There was a feasibility study done a couple of years ago that looked at how this would work, but it was really focused on Block J. And so we're now going back and modifying that internal layout within Block G2 to make sure that it meets what the county anticipates that it would want at whatever point in time in the future it elects to construct the Performing Arts Center in G2. That's why it's a blank slate at the moment. We hope to have that information by the time that we come back to you all later this spring. In terms of the Central Park component, it's kind of broken down into three different distinct areas. You'll see that the lower elevations are to the north up here by the WNOD trail. It kind of ascends to the middle of the site and down over to here, and then begins to taper off going to the west. And then as you climb Sunset Hills Road to the east, picks up a little bit more elevation in there. The touchdown point for and I'll show you this in more detail in a second, but the touchdown point from the metro station is really intended to be kind of a transition area with some lawn components to it. It would then enter into a grove and a larger lawn area with an outdoor cafe and similar things, taking advantage of sort of ground floor retail opportunities. And then as it transitions to the north, it becomes more of an amenity for the residential that would go into Block E and to Block F. This area is intended to be, call it the most intense component of the Central Park area. And this is intended to be more residentially focused with a transition down to the south. So as I get into kind of the details of it, the touchdown from the metro connection is here, lawn area, trees, and a substantial amount of hardscape, allowing for people to come into the site, outdoor seating, and be able to disperse across the site or to head north into the urban core of town center. As we then get into the middle area, I mentioned the outdoor retail pavilion that would look similar to this, that offers the opportunity for sort of activity, plus I'll call it seating areas and other things in this area, really focused on kind of the central gathering space for the Central Park. And then as we head farther to the north, it becomes a little more residential in feel in terms of the amenities to be provided. It allows for some flexibility to allow for, kind of these outdoor pavilion areas that can be transformed on a temporary basis into different purposes to meet the needs of whatever's happening in the Central Park to the south, or as part of overall programming for the RTC Next development. We also have, as part of the plan, we did this in phase 1, there were some areas underneath of the WNOD trails, electric transmission lines that are green spaces that historically have been sort of unprogrammed and unkempt areas. And so the plan is to convert them into usable space with playground equipment, fitness equipment, and other sorts of things consistent with what Dominion Virginia Power and the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority would allow to be constructed in these areas. As I mentioned, some of them have been provided as part of phase 1, so we would continue that as part of phase 2 in this area in the northeast corner. We also, as part of the project, so this is Library Street descending from the south down to Sunset Hills Road. This area currently adjacent to the westernmost Discovery Square office building functions as a stormwater management pond. And the idea is to convert it into a usable park space with the stormwater facility still provided within this area, but underground, and allow for a lawn area with benches and other things to be utilized on top of that, and then some flexible sport courts that could provide for things like volleyball or other elements. So it's really taking a stormwater detention facility and turning it into a usable park space. The Performing Arts Center, as I mentioned earlier, we had originally looked at an internal layout as part of the feasibility study that the county conducted for how the Performing Arts Center could lay out internally if it were located on Block J. Once we kind of reached agreement with the county to move it to Block G2, we're having to rethink the exact configuration of those spaces. Supervisor Alcorn has asked Commissioner Carter and a couple of other folks to help weigh in with some of this information about exactly how this would lay out. And as I said, we hope to have more information on this later this year, along with potential elevations and massing studies for what this could look like as well, because the idea is to incorporate this component into the PRC plan that would be approved for all of phase 2 so that assuming the county wants to move forward at some point in the future with this exact design, the PRC plan component of it would already be approved. There are some conditions that we have added to the proffer related to the dedication of Block G2 that really speak to the operations of how this performing arts center would work, which gives us really essentially an opportunity to kind of work with the county as those plans are being developed to ensure that it's obviously consistent with the Class A development that BXP hopes to provide within the Reston Next development, but also addresses operational issues like parking and adjacent office buildings, maintenance of the exterior facilities, et cetera. So those are all details to be worked out really after this project is approved, but before the county receives title to Block G2 for the Performing Arts Center. Overall, you can see the changes between phase 1 and phase 2. We've actually added square footage for office in phase 2 relative to what had been approved. We've made a slight reduction in the amount of ground floor uses, i.e. retail. We've eliminated a second hotel that was planned for phase 2, and we've slightly dropped the overall square footage of residential in phase 2, even though our residential buildings are approaching or exceeding 425 feet in height. There's only so much square footage you can put within these development blocks. And so it's really a reflection of some of the changes in the overall massing of the buildings as we kind of shifted the streets around a little bit. So overall, that's kind of a sense of where the development is. There are a bunch of exhibits in the plan set that show the massing and relationships of the phase 1 buildings to the proposed phase 2. So this is all the phase 1, the Volkswagen building, Fannie Mae here, Skymark here, the hotel in the background. And this is all the phase 2, the office in front, the residential in back. And so overall, that's where things are headed. And as I said, we're gearing up for a late second quarter Planning Commission public hearing. And so I'll stop there and answer any questions that you have. For Matt and Andrew, what did I leave out? Maybe let's start with that.
Mark, I think that was a great job. The only thing that I would add is that with the road network improvements that we are proposing with the second phase, the bifurcation of block G, the super block previously into 2 development blocks, and then the shifting of that north-south street to make the E and F blocks more equal widths. We did not impact the overall area of the Central Park. We held that east line of the Central Park as we were making those improvements so that the overall area didn't change. That's the only other comment I would add.
All right, thanks, guys. John, I don't know if you want to take over here, or do you want me to keep on going for tonight, or it's your call. You're the chairman.
Why don't you just finish up tonight, Rob, and then I can take it from there.
All right.
If that's okay.
Yeah, sure. No, let's go with Jared has a comment.
Sure. So, well, first of all, Matt, thank you for clarifying the parks. That was one of my questions. And some of the illustrations, it looked like the park narrowed compared to the original plan, but okay. So the other one, I have a question then for Mark. You had said that the pedestrian bridge, which I think is a critical component for overall success coming off the metro, you had said that it would be built under certain conditions. So what would be the conditions that that pedestrian bridge off the metro wouldn't get constructed?
So a couple of things. One, we view that as a regional improvement that benefits more than just this development, right? If you were coming across and you were going to the RTC West development as an example, or you were coming and going to West Market or somewhere else, particularly given what I think everyone acknowledges was a substandard condition that ultimately got built when the Reston Town Center Metro Station was constructed with respect to pedestrian access across Sunset Hills Road. We view that improvement as a real regional benefit. And under the Reston Road Fund that was set up to fund some of the regional transportation improvements within Reston if development applications, individual development applications provide improvements that are of regional benefit, then they can get credits for some of those, the cost of those improvements against their contributions into the Reston Road Fund. So if our contribution, let's say, was $5 million for all of phase two, and I'm making these numbers up, but let's say it was $5 million for all of phase two in the Reston Road Fund proffer structure, and that bridge costs $2 million to build, then we would want a credit for the $2 million that provides the regional benefit to the project. Those are details that we are still to work out. I think it's eligible for that, but until you really go to start to build it, the county won't confirm that in fact, they will give you the credit.
Okay.
So that's an example of what I'm talking about. And the same thing is true, by the way, with Library Street, because again, even though BXP is a large landowner within the urban core, it's not the only landowner. And so the Hyatt, benefits, and the Avant benefits, and Verisign benefits from that Library Street extension. And so we would want the ability to get road fund credit for all or a portion of the Library Street extension, the same way we would with the pedestrian bridge. But I think the intent, obviously, everybody thinks it's a needed improvement. The intent would be to build it, but it's not that we can do it above and beyond all of the other contributions that we'd be expected to make.
Okay, great. Thanks for clarifying.
Thanks, Jared. Let's go on to Lynn.
Do you really want to go to me? I have all of these.
Lynn, I'll start with this. Everything in there is approved as it is, but I'm happy to talk with you offline if that's easier about specifics. Either way.
In the phase two proffer statement, everything has been approved.
Well, what I was saying earlier was largely, and we can send you a red line of it if you're interested, but largely everything that is in that proffer statement is a carry forward of the proffers that were approved back in 2018 for both phase one and phase two. There are a few proffers, as I said, that were approved back in 2018 that really only apply to phase one. And there are new proffers that are being added because they only apply to phase two, such as the Performing Arts Center component of it. But
so that's a great segue, Mark.
Pick a number. 85% of what is in that proffer statement is identical to what's already been approved.
And it was approved when? In 2018?
2018, yeah.
So it was my understanding that Block J was the set aside for the Performing Arts Center. I don't know where G2 has come from. And granted, I was not part of Reston Planning and Zoning in 2018 when this was originally presented, but it was my understanding that Block J was to be the Performing Arts parcel. And then just, I was looking at the questionnaire that was submitted to Reston Planning and Zoning Committee. And on the second page, relevant comprehensive plan text, if applicable, is cut off. So, I mean, I can't see if you can, maybe resubmit the questionnaire or provide that.
Yeah, it may be that it's a function of your form as opposed to, because I think we attempted to answer the question. It just may be a function of the form having a limited box. But we'll
have to fix that, won't we?
Yeah.
And I did want to point out on the application that I was really pleased to see the zoning ordinance open space requirement is required at 15% and you're providing 30%. So kudos, bravo. Like to see more of that. And speaking of open space, On the proffer statement, getting to page 27 and 28. I'm really surprised that we are calling these parcels parks. The North Park East B and C is 1.1 acre. The Central Park North is less than an acre at 0.88. Central Park South is 0.55 acre. Metro Park is 0.6. These are tiny. I think that if we're calling it a park, it's, a park is a place where you can throw a frisbee. I don't think you can throw a frisbee on some of these. So, is this stuff that was approved in 2018?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Let's take this offline, and I don't want to waste everyone else's time going through my nitpicky details, but I appreciate it. And shall I work with you, Mark, or
Sure,
Matt?
that's fine. Yeah, that's
Okay,
fine.
thank you.
Either one of us. Sure.
Okay.
All right, thanks, Lynn. Let's go to William and then Tammy after that.
Yes, well, my forever comment is always vegetated roofs, and glad to hear that you're doing that. So one of the things that I would like to add for your consideration would be urban agriculture. Fairfax County has I guess you would say, a sort of a newly aggressive idea about that. These can be on the roofs. There are numerous major buildings downtown, both offices as high-rise resident, as well as high-rise residential, that have vegetated roofs that were actually changed after they were up for about 3 to 5 years to become urban agriculture. There's a company called Uptop Acres, which basically does, I think, all of them in the Washington, D.C. area, including the one that's across the highway from you, at Haley Rise. That one's on the ground. All of these basically provide the produce, which is a lot more than one would ever consider coming from some of the smaller spaces. They go to a charity organization. So typically the developer partners with the Uptop Acres or a farming group that does this kind of thing, both on the ground and on roofs, and then with a charity organization for distribution to other charities that distribute it directly. Very little effort. Pardon me?
Well, do you mind if I just interrupt for one quick
Sure.
sec? We actually have Uptop Acres operating on one of the rooftops in the first phase at RTC Next, and 2 of the rooftops in the urban core right now.
Super.
They are a wonderful outfit. We can't speak highly enough about them.
Yeah, I discovered them by accident some years ago, when I was checking into some of the projects that I did downtown and discovered that the developer had changed them to vegetated roofing.
Yeah.
It makes it one of the things that's really great about it is if you have a lower roof, that it's a high-rise residential and the people can look down upon it. They give tours on a lot of these things, and it's great to see, if you have a family and their kids that can look out the window instead of just looking down and maybe even just seeing green, you're seeing people down there doing farming activities in the summertime. That's kind of neat. So anyway, well, that's great.
Yeah, we've got a long history with them.
Great, super. Yeah, they're expanding up and down the East Coast too, so it's really taking off.
Yeah, and interestingly, it's becoming a real amenity on the residential projects where it builds like a sense of community amongst the residents who are living in these relatively small urban apartments. And it gives them an opportunity to grow their own produce. The residents are now starting to program events, and at the time of harvest they're doing a salad making class and things like that, which Uptop Acres actually helps facilitate as well as part of their offering. So it's really a neat program.
Great, great. Okay, that was my major comment.
Thank you, William. Let's go to Tammy, then under Rebecca.
Thank you. Mark, I also have 11 pages of handwritten notes and questions. So maybe Lynn and I can team up and ask those in detail. But a couple of major things. The unnamed 3-letter tenant in the red buildings, what is their lease and evacuation plan?
They have moved out. The lease expired on December 31st of 3 weeks ago, 4 weeks ago.
Okay, and so that's all vacant now. So that's not a impediment. Okay, Library Street, that is planned in your documents to be a vehicular someday. Do you think that will ever be built with given the cost and the, just the cost to get a bike bridge over Wheelie? What took how many decades and how many millions? And so I'm asking a vehicular pedestrian bridge is much more elaborate than the Wheelie bike bridge. But also you have the I don't know the topography there, and you have the electrical lines going over. Is there clearance for that to be a vehicular passageway? Is there height wise between
Yeah,
the
I would
hanging
describe
lines
it as threading a needle, but we have confirmed from an engineering perspective that we can both meet the electrical safety code that's required by Dominion, as well as the clearance from the WNOD trail and the MVRPA. And I think we have a section in our zoning set that shows the bridge in profile.
Okay, great. And also notoriously the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority is a bear to work with. So what I'm getting at is, what is the projection of this ever being built, in that it's not being funded right now? I mean, is it public funds? Is it Boston Property funds?
So the way we have it proffered at the moment, and I can throw back up on the screen the plan. So the way we have it proffered at the moment is that we construct let's get to a better plan than that. So the way we have it proffered is that we will construct the on-site portion, meaning like from the property line down to Sunset Hills Road, concurrent with the developments of both blocks F and J. So as an example, and with the park, right? So when we build the park, we would build, in theory, down to this intersection. When we build block F, we would build this section, and we build block J, we would build this section. I think the reality is that some version of this probably gets constructed all at once, because a lot of it is somewhat existing today. But what you wouldn't get is like the final street trees, street furniture, street lights on a particular block until that block develops, because otherwise you're having to damage it in order to do the construction. So all of the on-site portion would happen concurrent with the development of these 3 blocks. The way the proffers read now is that Boston Properties would construct the off-site portion, linking it up to the existing town center over the WNOD trail, concurrent with the later to develop of either the last building in block F or block J. So whichever one occurs last, we would make this connection up here. And the reason that we did it that way, as I said earlier, is the sort of the ability to complete all of these things is tied to the revenue streams from this and kind of being able to finalize what the development looks like so that it could be accepted into the VDOT system, because this is intended to be a public street as opposed to a private street. And so we can't turn it over to VDOT in a half completed version. I think, just speculating a little bit, it's possible if we could get the road fund credits sooner, that maybe that off-site portion could be constructed sooner. But a lot of that will depend on the phasing of these two blocks and which one goes first and which one goes last. But the proffer currently says that Boston Properties builds it and gets a road fund credit for it. So the cash outlay would come from BP, and it just wouldn't have to fund the road fund credits coming out of it.
Okay, so continuing on with this, the 2 blocks between Library Street and Reston Parkway, the Discovery buildings are on those now. Cross your heart and hope to die, stab a needle through your eye. Are you guys planning to rip those down and put new, more taller, more density in those 2 blocks? I'm going somewhere with this. And you're fudging so I can see you've answered my
No,
question.
I'm going to answer it by saying
No.
I'm betting that I'm retired before that happens.
Well, you could retire tomorrow, my darling. So
I'll be
that's-
retired
it's
before that happens.
nothing. Okay. So the answer is no plans to your knowledge.
That's right.
Okay. That gives you some outs. The other question is that I always ask is, what size, you're putting in 1,000 DUs in phase 2 alone. What size units are you planning to put in? Are they going to be the studio 1 and 2 bedroom teeny weeny things?
They follow an urban format. I would say that our average unit sizes are somewhere between 900 and 1,000 square feet across the entire building.
Okay, across
Do
the
you
entire
have-
phase 2.
Do you have 3 bedrooms in the Skymark,
We do.
Matt?
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do, but it's a limited number as a percentage of the overall. But yes, we have 3 bedrooms as well.
Okay, so we are putting in massive amounts of people here, new residents, and you are asking for a variance, I think, or whatever your terminology is, to in my experience, canopy and open space are not to include street trees and sidewalk areas. Those are not open space or canopy, but you're asking
Correct.
for the trees to be added to make up the canopy. And I am saying, please reduce the footprints of your buildings a couple feet, 4 feet, and allow some more space, because trees cannot exist and persist and thrive in tiny little tree boxes next to this much population, where everybody has a dog and every dog is going to pee on those trees. We've got debris from the roads and cars, salt if we ever get snow again. We've got people crashing into trees, driving along roads, etc. Those trees are so fragile and so vulnerable, and they are being smashed into smaller tree boxes than in the policy manual, which is criminal to begin with. So I'm asking for you all to consider and take back to Boston Properties, reduce the footprints of the buildings by a couple feet to allow more space for greenery, for our planet to live. This is, we have seen the effects of climate change, and we know it's not a good thing.
Timmy, just so I'm clear, where are you talking about? Because
I'm talking about your street, your blocks. The blocks are laid out with streets, but you're putting your buildings right up to as close to the edge as you possibly can get it. So I'm suggesting shrink your building measurements to allow for some trees, vegetation, green to exist where you're putting in massive amounts of new people. And this should be done across all new development in Fairfax, especially in Reston, where we're a biophilic community.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. I guess the one couple of things. One, largely what we are doing with the plan is adhering to the urban Reston design guidelines for how streets are to be laid out in terms of the amount of the width of the landscape amenity panel, the width of the sidewalk, and the width of the building zone. There are a couple of places where we are, based on certain configurations, dipping below on one of those measurements to address sort of the configuration of the block and how it's all tying together. But for the most part, we're just reflecting what's in the urban design guidelines. And I realize you may not agree with the way those are promulgated, but we're not really seeking a lot of latitude to deviate from the comprehensive plan's urban street sections.
no, I
And
understand, but you are requesting that tree boxes be reduced, and you are requesting the canopy be considered including street trees. And what
Right,
I
but
am
that's-
saying
yeah,
is
yeah.
look around, look at the weather, look at the disasters, look at the fires, look at the drought, and we are in a crisis on our planet. And it's up to all of us to give a little, even if it's the law and you can technically do it. You're right. I'm aware of the ecology being on a very thin knife edge. So I'm going to stop and let others have a chance. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Tammy. I think we're on to, yes, William, but you jumped back in here before Rebecca somehow.
Yeah,
Or-
no, I forgot to remove it.
Okay, thank you. Rebecca, then David or Sue.
Hey, thanks so much, Mark, for the presentation. I found it really helpful that you showed us what was approved in 2018. I wasn't part of this committee in 2018, and then what is new that you're having us look at. So I think one of the things that has really changed since 2018 is we get a lot more deliveries from Amazon, Uber Eats, DoorDash. How are we planning on dealing with these new buildings and development for all the delivery traffic, Uber, and those kind of things going in and out? Because I do worry about pedestrian traffic and clogging up the streets. So just wanted to kind of see how I wasn't able to figure that out looking at the plans, how you'll be able to address that.
So good question, and this is a John Carter special because he's asked about this before. On each of the plans, we have a requirement and have designated at least one parking space near the front door of each building for short-term loading, service, pizza drop-off, Amazon drop-off, in addition to having short-term loading spaces inside most of the buildings. So each block will have on-street parking dedicated as short-term loading for short-term loading purposes in front of each of the buildings. So, and we've shown them on the plans, and we have a proffer to that effect. And
Yeah.
Andrew can talk a little bit about the internals to the garage and sort of the difference between the big truck and short and smaller truck deliveries, if you're interested in that.
Well, I just feel like maybe more than one space is needed. I mean, just looking at my neighborhood, like it's a constant activity here, and we're in single family homes. I can't imagine if it's a high density situation, how congested that'll be. So I just want to make sure that that we are keeping it safe for the pedestrians and the other vehicles, that, you know, if the one's parking space is taken, that, you know, we don't have a traffic jam, and people trying to block sidewalks where pedestrians are walking.
Yeah, Rebecca, I would just add that it's a good point. The difference that I would point out in the more dense urban mixed use developments is that we don't have Amazon and FedEx and UPS pulling up to the front door. They have so many packages to get into the building. They have to be in the loading dock. And most of our loading docks are staffed with dock masters to manage that flow of traffic coming in and out of the loading docks. The other thing that I would mention that's a little bit unique to this project is that, like the urban core, almost all of the streets are private, which means we're responsible for all of the maintenance and the operation of those streets. And we have a 24/7 exterior security guard staff that is monitoring those short-term spaces and making sure that the right people are parking in them and for the right durations, and that you don't have those delivery trucks, you know, double parking somebody who's just, you know, dropping off something at the dry cleaner and trying to leave quickly. So we have tried to be thoughtful about how we handle that from an operating perspective.
Okay, and then just one more question. Do you have a tenant or tenants in mind for the office space? I feel like we have a lot delivering here coming up. Just want to make sure that it's needed and we have a good tenant for that space.
If we had a tenant, I would be going much faster through this process, or attempting to be going through this process much faster. But in all seriousness, we have already presented this project to a handful of potential build-to-suit clients just in the last 12 months. As you can imagine, those are very long-term commitments in order to get a project or a building of this size started. And with those long-term commitments come really, really complicated transactions that just take a lot of time to work through. We were fortunate in working through them with Fannie Mae and Volkswagen in the first phase of the project, and have done so fairly successfully in the town center for a long time. So nothing is definitive, but there are definitely some irons in the fire.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Rebecca. Okay, we had David and/or Sue next, and then to John after that.
Thanks, sir. Mark and Matthew, Sue's got a number of things to talk about, but I just have one quick question. I noticed that you were doing a nice workforce housing percentage. Have you and the staff discussed making room for other levels of affordable housing in these buildings?
We've not had a specific conversation. We didn't submit the proffers to staff until this most recent submission. That was the first chance they had gotten to see the proffers. So if they have comments on it, David, I'm sure they'll tell us that in the next go round. We carried forward the commitments from the original approvals in 2018. So what we're proposing is no different than what was proposed in 2018, largely because we were actually reducing the number of residential units as opposed to increasing them. And so there didn't seem to be a nexus to make a change, but I'm sure staff, if they have an opinion, will let us know in the next month to 6 weeks.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mark and Matthew, for the presentation. I have some questions and also comments. First, do you plan to work with Reston Public Art? Obviously, the park is a location that would be great for that. Where are you on that?
Do you want to do? We will work with them. They did with phase 1. If you haven't been there, underneath of the Volkswagen building, among other places, is a pretty substantial piece of art that's built into the side of the building that reflects wind and light and other things. And so I'm not saying they'll replicate that here, but we've even identified with staff as we've tussled with them a little bit about garage entry locations, about where we think the most appropriate locations for public art would be, to make sure that we're not putting garage entries at a place that is a good candidate for public art. So it's definitely been thought about. The specifics of what it is, I don't know, Matt, if you've reached any kind of conclusions on that, but I know it's definitely in the thought process.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure that it is an integrated part and it's thought about as you indicate early on, as opposed to being an afterthought. So thank you on that. Also, membership with Reston Association. I noticed you said no in the application, and that your rationale was that you're already a member of RTCA, and you know P&Z's position on that we want you to be a member of Reston Association. Also, DRB review, it'd be great to go beyond RTCA design board when the time is appropriate for architectural input, you know, just another point of view. Could you bring up the slide that you showed, RTC next? It was called overall site plan. And the reason I'm overall site plan, yes, right there. And I wanted you to bring that up because this gets back to what Tammy was talking about, where she was urging you to reduce floor plan to increase green space. And if you look along Sunset Hills Road, you have your 8-foot sidewalk. It appears that there, you know, are trees there, but when the project is actually constructed, often those trees or the greenery become much less than what is intended. And my point is that if you look at B, now B looks like there's adequate landscaping there, but if you actually are driving downtown Center Parkway toward the metro, you really don't feel that you're in Reston at all. It's a very, very stark look. And so we want to make sure that there is adequate landscaping. And if that means reducing your floor plan by a few feet, as Tammy said, then, you know, I certainly would support that and would hope that more people on PNC would.
Yeah, Sue, on that topic, just
Yeah.
to dive into the weeds for a second. So
Sure.
and I'm gonna stop sharing to look something up as we're talking about this. But Sunset Hills Road, unlike the interior streets, as Matt was saying, is already a public street. And when it's a public street, there are certain standards that we have, VDOT standards with which we have to comply. And that includes the location of street trees and other sorts of things that are set out in the VDOT design manual. One of the things that we do with the internal streets, and I'm going to pull this up just so you can see it. This is in the proffers. So we have, and I'm going to go down through here a little bit. So we've got proffers that deal with streetscapes and ensuring that we're meeting the streetscape requirements. We have Reston specific streetscapes, which were along Sunset Hills Road and along Town Center Parkway, that in phase 1 that required kind of double plantings of trees in certain locations. So we're actually going, with respect to Sunset Hills Road, as we did with Town Center Parkway, a little bit above and beyond what the comp plan recommends for street trees. And then on the internal streets, and this is something that Commissioner Carter has pressed for, is that each of the street trees on the internal streets would be approximately 30 feet on center so that we're providing a repetition of the trees that meets a certain standard as opposed to trying to sprinkle them. So both with respect to Sunset Hills Road and the internal street trees, we're actually doing more than what is typically required in the urban street standards that the county has promulgated as part of the comprehensive plan. There may be some instances on these public streets where for sight distance reasons or other things, that gets disrupted because VDOT has certain standards that we have to meet on not putting the trees too close to the intersection. And I know John, Rob, and a few others can speak to their experiences with that. But the point is, we're trying to do more than the minimum required, both internally and on the perimeter within the rules that we have available to us.
Right. I'm recalling a charrette that I attended in the mid 1990s, and it was specifically on this whole site in relation to the metro and how important it was to have an aesthetic experience of walking from the metro to and through the town center. And so, I do appreciate what you're talking about and trying to do. I just think sometimes, yes, a little bit too much is gone by the wayside because of what VDOT puts in or whatever is required. But I just think that if you can make sure that there is, maybe even push it a little bit more than the adequate that you feel you have right now. Because again, if you drive downtown Center Parkway, the trees that are on your design are not there, and it's not that soft look that one, in looking at the design overall site plan slide, would have you think.
Fair enough.
Okay. The other thing, the changing the mass of G to G1 and 2, and I do think it's a better design. My concern is the county assuring you that G2 is actually going to be of adequate size for the Performing Arts Center and adequate space and accommodate what is envisioned there?
Yeah. Sue, I can jump in. And Andrew Kobolka from Gensler was on the team that helped us do this, so he'll chime in as well. But what we did was we took the feasibility, the program that was outlined in the feasibility study that Grimm and Parker did. I can't remember what year that was. But when it coincidentally, when we modified the road network, as we've been talking about this evening, what was the size of the previous block J ended up being almost exactly the size of what now is block G2, and comes with it the benefit of being closer to the metro station and literally adjacent to the Central Park. And so what Andrew and his team did was take the programming of that feasibility study and almost like looking at a puzzle, recreated it, but on the G2 site to make sure that each of those programmatic elements that were identified as part of that process were accommodated in what could be a layout for block G2. As Mark mentioned, we're sort of just at the very early stages of putting pen to paper on that, but the short answer is yes, and it's based on that feasibility study.
Okay, thank you for that information. And then you have several pages regarding stormwater management, and on C15B, you mentioned the total stormwater captured by BMPs would be 50%. So I'm presuming that's your vegetated roofs, your water harvesting, your underground vaults under the park, etc. What percent of stormwater runoff will actually run off-site? Will any of it, or are you planning to capture all stormwater on-site?
So this is one of the unique aspects of the way that this development was phased. in what Mark described as the first phase of the project, before we redeveloped the site, there was an existing wet stormwater pond that had to be decommissioned in order to allow for the construction of the phase one of the development. That pond handled both quantity and quality for the entirety of the 22-acre site. And so what we ended up doing as part of the first phase of the development was constructing a 2 million gallon vault that is below grade, running partially underneath the east-west street in phase one. That vault is designed to hold the 10-year storm event. And then it has a series of weir walls and pumps that operate to discharge that storm event at a designed rate that Urban, who is our civil engineer, and Fairfax County could describe in much better detail than I can. But those pumps are on emergency power so that they can't overflow and back up the entire system. And there's a pretty robust maintenance program associated with that, as you can imagine. But the larger point is that almost all of the stormwater management associated with this entire 22 acres had to be constructed with the first phase because of the location of that wet pond that had to be decommissioned. We've essentially, that cast was died then.
Okay, so that is seen as adequate to handle all of your parcels as well. And so, and you are following the current stormwater management ordinance, or are you relying on any grandfathering clause?
Well, I think our analysis is provided in comparison to the current stormwater regulations for the second phase of the site.
Right. In short terms, the first phase is on has a different approval with different standards because it's existing. The second phase is meeting the updated stormwater management regulations that focus, including the comprehensive plan, that focus on capturing and treating the first inch of runoff, as opposed to the 2 and 10-year storms being the sole objective with this.
Okay.
Which is why the rainwater harvesting and the vegetated roofs become that much more important, because those are the elements that treat the first inch of rainfall independent of the rate of the rainfall. Whereas the 2 and 10-year storms really focus on the rate of runoff.
Okay. Thank
Mark,
you for that. That's all I
just
have.
a quick follow-on question because it's relevant right now. What percent of the 1 inch are you able to accommodate?
I don't remember.
I don't remember, John. I'm looking to see here now. As soon as we started talking about this,
I think if I'm reading the sheet correctly, and you all may be more familiar with it than I am, I think it's a little over 4/10 of an inch.
yeah. I want to say it's 45%, John. But we can rather than have lawyer play engineer, we can get back to you on it.
Yeah.
I think this
Sorry about that, Sue. I just wanted to ask that question.
Yeah, no. Just our concern, of course, is Sugarland Run, and eventually all of this, whatever, if there is any runoff from the site, would end up west into Sugarland Run. So it's very important to make sure that.
Yeah, I mean, importantly, Sue, what happens? What happens to it? What happens to it is that it leaves, let's say it hits one of these buildings, it gets flushed through the vegetated roof or the rain harvesting. It eventually gets captured into the vault in phase one that Matt was describing, where it's then released through a straw into a storm drain that eventually drains to the pond on the west side of West Market. And then from there goes into Sugarland Run. So there are multiple detention and treatment facilities that it enters before it actually ends up into the Sugarland Run watershed. I don't disagree with you as to where it ends up.
Yeah, I understand there originally was, but those are very stressed. That's what I'm saying. So,
yeah, I mean, I think the way we certainly view it is not unconstrained or unrestrained. It is not unconstrained. It or unrestrained movement into the watershed, whereas there's a whole lot of stuff upstream from this that has significantly fewer, if any, controls on it, right? So what we're trying to do is, for the piece that we can control, it will leave the site much better than it enters it. But we're just a very small piece of the puzzle.
Rob, I think my hand went down accidentally.
Yeah, you're up next, John. But Sue, is that it for you, Sue?
I think we should be assured of how much stormwater you are going to be able to capture and hold, and we would want to know what the percent is that could possibly run off that site and into West Market area, etc.
So the way the standard works is that the entirety of phase 1 and phase 2 would reduce the peak flow rate for the 2-year 24-hour storm by 25%. We're not preventing the release from water from the site, right? That's not what's happening. What we are doing is capturing about 42% of the first inch, 40 or 0.42 of the first inch, and trying to keep it on site. But you can't totally prevent the release of it. But what we're trying to do, it's, as you know, erosion happens from the rate of discharge, not the amount of discharge, right? And so by slowing the rate, we reduce the chances for erosion,
right,
which is what the focus really is.
Right. And Rob, you're our expert on this, so we just want to make sure that there isn't significant erosion into the West Market area and into Sugarland Run, and because those certainly are stressed at this time. Originally, those detention pond areas and ditches were adequate to handle stormwater runoff, but they are proving to not be. That's all.
All right. Thanks, Sue and Dave. You have to work on that microphone a little bit for next meeting. Go ahead, John.
Thank you. Thanks for all of your comments, Sue. Those were great, and everyone else as well. Mark, as a follow-on comment to Sue, I think it would be useful if you could give a comparison of the requirements versus what you're doing, providing for stormwater, for the Reston comp plan, and obviously for the state requirements. And certainly I understand that this is a unique site and you had certain things that were done a long time ago. And so it'd be good for us to understand that as well as it relates to the Reston comp plan. Because I believe the comp plan requires 100% of the 1 inch, which I also understand is tough to accomplish. So during our next meeting, I think this is just an intro, correct? So during our next meeting, it'd be good to sort of just fully explain that to everyone. That would be useful. And then there was a question from Lynn actually in the chat, and I was curious as well because I haven't checked in on this in a while. What's the status of the underpass under the toll road from Sunset Hills to Sunrise Valley. Do you happen to know that?
The last, maybe Matt, maybe you got more updated information, but the last I heard, which is admittedly probably 2 years ago, they were trying to get some money to do another round of further design work, but I don't candidly know whether that ever materialized. There was a flurry of activity maybe 3 or 4 years ago around doing some design work, but I don't think anything has moved since then. We can
Yeah.
ask, but I've not seen anything.
Yeah, it's been a while since I've gotten an update. They reached out a few times to get access to come survey on site in preparation for some of those design drawings, but or engineering work, but I can't even remember how long ago that was now.
Okay.
But we
Thank
can
you.
find
Just
out.
curious. Yep.
Yeah, I mean, right now, what are they're planning Soapstone is open in 32. Am I remembering that correctly?
Yeah, it seems to change a lot, but
Yeah.
sounds right.
Because I know whatever it is, this is behind that. We know that much.
I
Yeah,
think
thank you.
32 was a best case scenario.
Thanks, Michelle.
Yeah, it's like all those big projects, they take a while. Thank you.
Thanks, John. Let's go on to Matt.
Thanks. Excuse me. I've been fairly quiet tonight, but listening intently to everybody else's comments. A couple of my questions have kind of been answered. So this is going to be more just sort of general reactions and statements. I think that overall the master plan of breaking down the blocks into some smaller components is a strong move. I think it's going to actually help the sort of walkability and feel of kind of the urban spaces as you're moving through those sites or moving through those streets. I liked the move to try to get as much of the loading and the garage entry and egress sort of off of one street, which kind of frees up some of the other connecting streets to really focus on that pedestrian experience as people move through the site. So you have kind of two strong axes, a north-south and an east-west axes through the site that are, going to be those sort of pedestrian arteries. I guess that my biggest concern, and you've already talked about it, so I'm not sure there's really another answer, is this project from sort of a, 10,000 feet up in the air looking down, I guess, view is really the connective tissue. I mean, that's what it was sort of sold as back in 2018 between the metro and the existing town center. We're going to build these two sites. They're going to tie these two things together and sort of create this one walkable, urbanized community from the toll road and the metro all the way back into the older town center. So to me, having these connection points is like incredibly important. I just don't think the development works as well. I think that we run the risk, not just at this site, but at a lot of these more urbanized sites in Reston, of kind of having these islands of urbanism, where if you want to go from one to the other, like people literally are like getting in their car and driving like a half mile down the street because there's really like not a really comfortable sort of walkable streetscape that people would want to do that on. I know you want to fix that. I'm just concerned, I guess, with the connections across the O&D trail, the extension of Library Street. I would really just like to know that that's going to happen because I think it makes this development so much better with all those connections in place. There really does start to sort of stitch the old and the new town center together, and also the bridge, extending across and coming down into the plaza. I mean, it's a really nice design move. I think it's a great idea. I just would really like to see it happen. And I understand the concerns and the constraints of other property owners and proffers and things like that. But I just would like to see all that get done because I think it makes all of this work, and it doesn't work as well without it. And that's all I've got. Oh, actually, I'm curious. I'm actually a little bit curious about the Performing Arts Center. Do you have any more information about like the scale of that or the types of performances? I mean, are we looking at something like Capital One or the Anthem at the Wharf, or is this more like State Theater, something smaller, more community focused? I'm just kind of curious what the anticipation of that is being.
Yeah, the feasibility study, I think the largest performance venue is a 500 seat auditorium. So
That's
not to the scale of the Anthem or Capital One.
Okay, just curious about that. But yeah, I mean, the more you can put it together to make sure, or at least try to get what needs to be done to make these connection points happen, I think is really important to this.
Yeah. Matt, just on your first point, I put this back up because I think your point's well made about kind of the moat that is the WNOD trail as it relates to trying to connect the existing urban core with this block, because it's a moat in the sense that there are grade changes, there are use restrictions and access restrictions. You got power lines that parallel it. And so there's been a lot of attention paid back in 2017, 2018, and now about trying to help facilitate that connection. And as we go, let's call it west to east, this is the bridge over top of Town Center Parkway, right? So it's an elevated connection that goes over the road. It then drops back down. You kind of reach grade here. The VeriSign building is up a hill. There's a Billy Goat Trail that has historically been the connection down to the WNOD Trail on the VeriSign side of the WNOD Trail. One of the things that Commissioner Carter pushed for back in 2018 was an at-grade connection to the WNOD Trail here from the development. So from phase one, making an at-grade connection, which has since been constructed. And then as this begins to go down, actually, and it decreases in elevation to get under the pedestrian bridge that ends up over here, you end up with another elevated connection here that comes over top, drops down, and then provides a connection into phase two and ultimately into phase one. So in this scenario, you have an at-grade connection to the trail here. You have a pedestrian crossover here. We're then going to have a vehicular and pedestrian crossover here, and then another pedestrian crossover over here, because this sits high, this sits low, this sits high, and this sits high. And so just the fact that it's kind of as I said, a moat that runs through the middle of it means that you've got to be creative. And the Northern Virginia Regional Park Authority wants to limit the number of intersections with the trail to where you just can't pop one of these things off anywhere you want them. They're very protective of where you can make 90-degree connections to the trail. So the only one we've been permitted to make is at this location here directly to the trail. Everything else has to go over top of the trail. So it's definitely a Rubik's Cube of trying to figure out how do you make these connections. We've just done the best that we can do given the grades and given the Regional Park Authority's position on this stuff. But your point's well made.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to make sure that that happens, I guess, is really because it just doesn't work as well without it.
Yeah.
I guess the only thing sort of design-wise is I think those connections, especially the pedestrian bridge where it comes into your grand park there, and it's going back a few years, but I think I might have mentioned this when we were discussing phase one. I just think that sort of offloading point coming off of the bridge and the connection off of your sort of internal street there into your grand park should really be celebrated. I mean, it's sort of the main path of travel for pedestrians. So, I don't think you should come off this like really grand park with all these features and amenities and then have this thing like shrink down to like a 5-foot sidewalk with some like basic site lighting on it. Like I think that there's an opportunity there to really like celebrate that connection and draw people towards it from both directions. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Matt. Michelle.
Hi, just piggybacking off of that. So if that pedestrian bridge from the metro is not built, how are you handling the pedestrian traffic then? Is there, and forgive me, I didn't drive over there today to confirm, but is there a crosswalk outside of the one to the west of these properties?
Yeah, there's an existing crosswalk coming off of the metro today. And so if you were out there today, you'd have a crosswalk that would take you across Sunset Hills Road. The the existing problems, frankly, are on the metro side of the road as opposed to this side of Sunset Hills Road. We've actually worked with Supervisor Alcorn over the last 5 years to try to help facilitate some improvements in that area already. But the I'll call it the bigger challenge is on the metro side of Sunset Hills Road because of the narrowness of where the touchdown point is and where it intersects with Sunset Hills Road. So I'll stop there. I mean, that's largely the challenge, and we're just trying to make it better with the pedestrian crossover and get people out, frankly, out of navigating the conflict with kiss and ride and bus facilities that are on that side of the street.
Got it. But does the current crosswalk, would it essentially drop them off right in the park now? If the park were to be built right now?
It would drop them off, yes, on the side of the park. So if I can throw up on the screen.
Yeah, thank you.
While Mark's doing that, that intersection now has a crosswalk at all four legs. And not well represented in that graphic, but there is a connection that would be at like the southwest corner.
Yeah, so let me show you right now, this street exists and there's a crosswalk coming over from the metro right here.
Right.
So
But
as you
there's
come
not
off of the
one-
metro, you come down and then you cross here. The idea would be to do the elevated connection directly into the park here adjacent to building G1 and this area so that people didn't have to use this crosswalk. They could still use it if they so choose, but the safer route would be to use the elevated connection here. And so as I get down into more of the weeds on that, you can see where it is relative to, so it would come over and then there'd be an escalator and a staircase down and dropping people off in the middle of this plaza. And then they could disperse from there to go west or north or east, or even double back to Sunset Hills Road if they wanted to.
Mark, sorry to cut in. When they built the existing tower at the Kiss and Ride, there's a knockout panel on the side of that, right?
Correct.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, I thought so.
Okay,
that was actually
anything would be.
Yeah.
Mark, sorry, Mike Jennings. I go past that daily to go to the Y. Anything would be improvement because half the people don't use the crosswalk anyway.
Yeah.
They're all trying to get over maybe it's better now that the CIA is gone, but it's one of the worst intersections for pedestrians in Reston.
Okay, so if you do not get the credits, then we won't see the pedestrian bridge. And then they'll have to go west and cross at the major intersection, right? To get there.
They just cross where they would cross today.
Right.
Yeah.
But it wouldn't, okay. And would it impact removing the pedestrian bridge? Does that impact any of the rest of the design to the park?
No.
Okay. All right.
And Michelle, there is, if you went one block east, which
Mhm.
is where the signalized intersection for that three-letter government agency is. There is a four-legged crosswalk there as well.
Yeah. Yeah, but we
It's
know what
not great.
happens.
Yeah,
Here
not
it
And it's
great.
is.
not exceptionally accessible and easy, unfortunately.
No, I
So,
agree.
yeah. Okay, and I just want to confirm. So this is all contingent primarily on getting a credit for the road fund. Is that correct? Or is there any
Correct.
other condition where you would not build the pedestrian bridge?
I mean, we should have, I don't want to say it's an impossibility or that there's zero other inhibitors to it, but to was it John or Mike's point, or whoever raised it first, that knockout panel was something that BXP negotiated with um, the airports authority during the construction of the metro in anticipation of that. So we've actually anticipated that connection for 15 years.
Uh,
Or
okay.
12 years anyway. So the intent would be obviously to build it. But its cost has risen significantly since we first contemplated it.
Hmm. And are we to infer that you're getting some feedback that might not occur, or that you're just saying these are potential possibilities?
That we might not get the credit.
Correct.
We're still early on in that conversation. We daylighted this for a number of people. And we need to have some additional conversations with them around it. But I'm not projecting either way that we don't think we can get it. We made clear in the 2018 approvals that we anticipated needing that and have made clear here. But the reality is they won't give you the credits until you've kind of begun to implement it and the credits are due. So you don't technically get the credits until you're ready to pay the contributions, which could be years from now.
Right. That
So
was my
that's
next question. Can you just
a little bit, that's
remind
why I'm
me?
hedging a little bit.
Got it. And can you just remind me what is this tied to? Building the pedestrian bridge timeline wise?
Give me 1 second. I think it's tied to block G1.
I think it's just securing the necessary approvals to construct it, knowing the we don't have control necessarily over the VDOT and FCDOT and WMATA approval processes. Because
But it's
they
not
all have
tied.
jurisdiction.
Okay, but it's not tied to the actual building of any of these or.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Michelle. Before I go on, Lynn, I just see your hand popped up. But let me just weigh in on that. So, you know, Mark and Matthew, I don't know if you recall, but I know with this committee, when phase one was decided on, there was a lot of concern at the time that this pedestrian crossing was not being put in place at that time. And so, I seem to recall there were, quite a number of reassurances that, hey, this thing will come in at phase two. And so it is an important connection, and I think it needs to be a vital piece of the phase two. And so I totally understand the credit and the credit issue, but that's got to be solved, and I think it has to be a part of an integral part of this phase because I think it's what was driving the whole um, the whole density and the whole development and the design from the beginning. So definitely I strongly urge you to work that out and work it out
Yeah.
early so that it's not an impediment later on.
Yeah, Rob, we hear you, and what I would say is we agree relative to the importance of this connection. The hesitation you may hear in our voice is it dealing with WMATA and VDOT is different even than dealing with the MVRPA. And it took me almost as long to build that bridge as it did all of those buildings in phase one. So yeah, we hear you. We know it's really important.
Matthew, listen, I worked on the connection at Capital One at the back door of their metro station, and it's still
I
not
can't
built yet.
imagine.
So I know exactly the frustration you're encountering. Hey, I'll go to Lynn, and then I want to go to Commissioner Carter right after Lynn to see if he has any comments he'd like to make.
Yeah, and
before we wrap
Rob,
up.
thank you. It's really more of a point of clarification. During this evening's comments, I heard two different things. I heard a pedestrian crossover, and I heard a vehicular crossover. Is this vehicular or pedestrian?
Which one? To the metro station or to the urban core?
Well, is there a vehicular?
Yes. So there
Yes.
is so up on the screen.
Yeah,
Let me see if I've got a better.
yeah, and go
Actually,
go
let me
slow
go
with
to-
your mouse. I'm having a hard time tracking where you're
Okay.
going.
So I'll go back to one of the beginning slides. So if you can see my cursor here on the
Yes.
left-hand side,
Yes.
this is Town Center Parkway. This is existing. That's vehicular and pedestrian.
And Town Center
Um,
Parkway is the one that is supposed to go connect north and south.
It's supposed to go
through
under the
underpass.
toll road, go
Correct.
under the toll road and connect
Yes.
to eventually connect to Edmund Halley or Sunrise
Right.
Valley Drive or someplace to the south.
Correct. Now you're talking
m-
about an overpass for pedestrian overpass to
No,
get to the metro station?
what we're talking about is starting at the metro station in the south.
Mhm.
There is as you come off of Metro, you're on a bridge over top of the toll road.
Right.
You reach the end of the bridge and turn right, and there
Yep.
is a pavilion, and you can go down a set of escalators or a set of stairs to
Yep.
get
And
down to
there's a
Sunset
crosswalk
Hills
there
Road.
now on the road.
Correct. There's a
Yep.
crosswalk.
Yep.
What we're talking about is at the end of that bridge or at the end of that pavilion,
Uh-huh.
while you are still elevated, connecting a new bridge over Sunset Hills Road that would be for pedestrians only and would
Okay.
drop you down into the middle of not the middle, but the lower third of the Central Park. And
Okay. Thank you for
that
the
bridge
clarification.
over Sunset Hills Road would have an escalator and an elevator and a staircase at the end of it. Once
Thank
you
you.
hit that, once you hit that, then there would be a pedestrian connection to the north all the way up to the WNOD trail, in which case you would then pick up a new elevated pedestrian bridge that was recently completed, so it is operational today, that would take you over the WNOD trail and drop you in adjacent to the bus transit facility that is existing in the middle of the urban core. So it would
Got it.
skirt along the eastern edge of the Verisign building in between the bus transit facility and the Verisign building. And that drops you into Bluemont Way, which is which is the southernmost east-west road within the urban core.
Thank you for the clarification. I appreciate it. That's great.
And then a new vehicular connection to the east where Library Street is today. And I say vehicular, but that would include both vehicles and pedestrians, with a new bridge to be constructed over the WNOD trail to link Library Street eventually down to Sunset Hills Road. So that is a new connection that would be made in phase 2, whereas this bridge was made as part of phase 1 and was completed. And then the pedestrian bridge from the metro station itself would be part of phase 2 as well.
Well, I don't want to get into the slope and how that conforms to the Americans with Disabilities Act, but that'll be another question later. Thank you.
I think we hit all of those metrics, Lynn.
Okay,
Yeah.
great. Thank you.
Thanks, Lynn. Let me see if Commissioner Carter would like to weigh in at all tonight. All right, maybe,
Okay.
maybe not.
Oh, he's not muted. He's
Oh.
there. There he is.
Yeah. So just a couple things. Do you have to go through RA or town center for the design?
Town Center Design Review Board, and we've already gone through them. Last time was in October, Matt. Am I remembering that correctly, Andrew?
Yes.
Okay.
So we might want to discuss what came out of that, but not now. The other thing, I think it was last time we went through in a lot of detail, and this was mostly me with Alan Ward and your development team. We went over all the trees and all the lights. Remember, we had the light discussion. And of course, they're the designers, but I think that review was helpful, and I think quite a lot got done at that time. So I'd like to do that when the time comes up. And I think we did the same thing with the area adjacent to the WNOD trail, which is basically what we're doing is this long linear park that's 4 miles long from one end of Reston to the other. So we want to keep that going. I know this phase, because of the grade there, that the connection to the park is probably not even possible, but if there's space in there, we should go over that. And then something I would suggest for P&Z, I wonder if this is a time where VDOT and Fairfax County DOT ought to come to P&Z and talk about the design of these intersections. We talked about the crosswalks, and we talked about different aspects. So I wonder if we shouldn't push for that either as part of a P&Z meeting or offline. I think that would be helpful. And the other thing is, my last thing is doing something with Sunrise Valley Drive. Phase one, you did the best you could. And I know Sunrise Valley Drive is a high-speed highway and very hard to deal with, but some of your buildings, particularly the one that's in Lot J, I assume that would be fronting actually on Sunrise Valley Drive. And so the impression of that would be quite improved over what you have now in phase one. A front door, I don't know if there could be any retail, but maybe something that would perhaps animate that frontage. I think we ought to work on the frontage of Sunrise Valley Drive. Otherwise, it's a blank wall for the whole length. It would be awfully long when you combine this with phase one to have that just extended for all throughout phase two. So I think we should work on that. And the last one is the stormwater management standards, and I guess we can talk about that later too. What is required today, and I don't know off the top of my head, but that will certainly come up at the Planning Commission. So there you go.
Thanks, John.
Sounds good.
Are you relating well to VDOT and FC on Sunrise Valley Drive? I think they ought to be explaining when the bridge is going to be built, because they're the ones who would control whether you get credit or not. And then there's the design of the crosswalks, and are they the right width and at the right location and all of that. Seems like a little more work with that VDOT ought to be responsible for.
We've gotten some feedback from them. A lot of the crosswalks are existing. A lot of times what we'll see is they may want modifications to the crosswalks as opposed to when they're already in place. For example, their sort of standard crosswalk is the 2 lines with unmarked pavement in between. And sometimes they'll ask for high visibility crosswalks or something like that have, diagonal striping in the middle of the crosswalk as an example. We don't have any mid-block crossings to where we would need hawk signals or something like that as part of this. So a lot of the crosswalks are already existing. So I don't anticipate new crosswalk requests as part of this. I think
you might have some at the park there. and the second road, once that gets connected, there may
Yeah,
be-
internal to the development, we'll have some, but those are all private streets, and so we will have pavers and
yeah,
other sorts of things that go with it. I didn't get into the details today, but one of the things that we're doing with this plan, if you've been out on that section of Sunset Hills Road, with phase one, they made us proffer an additional westbound lane that is currently striped out and not
Yeah.
in use.
yeah,
And it ends up making for a very long pedestrian crossing of Sunset Hills Road in that location. So part of what we are doing in front of phase two is to try to narrow the width of Sunset Hills Road in front of phase two so that pedestrian crossing is not as long and as dangerous in phase two as it is at the intersection of Town Center Parkway and Sunset Hills Road today. I think is it, 120 feet of crossing in that location or thereabouts. And we're trying to get that down to a much more manageable number here to improve that pedestrian experience, to your point, John. So happy to go through those details with you, but there's a lot of stuff that we're doing with this second phase that frankly, we weren't permitted to do in the first phase,
right.
or at least we're attempting to do it in the second phase that we weren't allowed to do in the first phase to try to emphasize the pedestrian more.
Yeah. I think Noah Wiley couldn't get across some of those streets within the time.
Yeah.
But I think perhaps VDOT ought to explain some of this going forward. I think they have the approval power and hopefully they have some design power working with you all on these issues. But anyway, it's animating Sunset Hills, the land adjacent to the WNOD trail, VDOT returning, stormwater management, and then you already explained that Town Center is reviewing this project. Okay.
Yep.
That's a
Thank you.
start.
Thank you, John. Tammy, we're going to wrap up. You have a quick comment?
I do. I have three really quick things. Two for the future meeting. To be discussed, who pays for the PAC? If it's Fairfax County, that's great. If it's small tax district 5, that's a hell no. Number two, climate change is real. And in Reston proper, we have had 2 100-year storms in the last couple years. And I can tell you that RA has had massive damage to bridges over streams. So that's a real thing. Talking about a 2-year and a 10-year storm is understandable, but we have really serious stuff. So I'm so happy that, we had questions on stormwater management. The last comment is, how many developers have been executed for going above and beyond what VDOT requires? I haven't heard of anybody. If there is anybody, I'm offering to pay for their cremations. So I would please think about giving us a little bit more so that our planet stays green. Thank you very much. Your presentations were fantastic. Really appreciate it.
Good. How do you define executed, by the way? Do you mean fired or do you mean
No, I
actually
mean
killed?
murdered.
Because those are
Yeah.
two different things.
Yeah,
And I suspect there's more of the former and none of the latter.
yeah, exactly. So, thank you.
All right. With that final comment, Mark, how about giving us just a summary of what do you think next steps are?
So we'll get next round of staff comments towards the tail end of February, first part of March. And then we will be gearing up for a submission towards the end of March with a plan to try to get to the Planning Commission in the June timeframe. Maybe I guess it'd be early April, but a submission in early April for a June Planning Commission public hearing. I would anticipate we could do an interim meeting if you want around a couple of these items like stormwater management, so that we can get the engineers involved and do an interim meeting on that topic. And, if John wants on the kind of landscape details around the park piece as an interim step. But we're probably not going to be in a position to have full staff input on this until we get to the, call it end of April timeline, end of April or into early June. So we could try to do an interim meeting on stormwater and a couple of other things if you want, but otherwise I think I would plan to come back in the May timeframe.
Okay, I mean, I'll leave that up to John, but I would, yeah, the sooner the better. And I think I wouldn't wait till at least May. I definitely have some of those interim discussions much earlier, but.
Yeah, Mark, I'll reach out to you. Sorry, John. Mark, I'll reach out to you to see if there's a convenient time.
Sure.
Maybe Tammy and I can get together and consolidate our comments and
Sure.
get those answered.
Just let me know.
Yeah, Mark, I was just going to say, obviously, these are very complex urban projects with a lot of details, and I think everyone just wants to make sure it's done right, including, I'm sure, you all. So I have personally found like meetings like this are very useful. So thank you for tonight, and likely a few meetings before our final vote is warranted, because it just takes a little bit of time to get through it all. So, but you've been through this before, so you understand.
Well, maybe what we could do is do kind of an informal meeting on those couple of topics, and we can just pick a date and throw out invitations to people, and if they are available and want to do it. I know you've got other things on your formal agenda, and maybe that's a way not to clog that up with some of these other details. And it may be that not everybody's as interested in the calculations of storm runoff as others. So that might be an interim way to do it.
Sure, that sounds like a good idea. Thank you.
Okay.
All right. Well, Mark, let
all.
you guys go. We'll have the committee stay on the line here for a minute, but you all can be dismissed for the night. Really appreciate
Thank
your
you.
presentation. Thanks, guys, for
Good to see
Thank you.
everyone.
Guys.
hanging with
See ya.
us.
Thank you.
Yeah, and Rob, I don't know what's going on with my camera, but it is not working. So just want you to know I'm here.
That's quite all right. Hey, listen, I just before we break up for the night, I just wanted to, give a big thank you to everybody. It's really been a privilege to be on this committee for so long. I've been on it for 26 years, believe it or not.
Wow.
So, I just thought it was time
That's
to
amazing.
say that, it's time to depart. But listen, I know everybody on this committee deeply cares about Reston. It's very obvious. And I've really learned a lot from every one of you. It's great because everybody has a different perspective, and I come at it sometimes from an engineering perspective, and others have, other attributes. And collectively, I think we do really well and really do a lot of good for Reston. The key, as you all know, is we're one part of such a bigger process here, and as Mark tried to outline tonight, even in this one particular project, the steps that they have to go through eventually to get to approval, there's many of them, and we're just a small piece into a larger puzzle. So we do often have to recommend there's a lot of push-pull in these projects, and a lot of us over the years have gotten into some specific areas that are kind of like, what's dear and near to our hearts, and we start to try to influence these projects with some of these areas. But we do have to be careful of going steering too far from where the regulations really and what they require. And I think we could try to educate, we can try to do as much as we can to influence these applicants, but that at some point we have to weigh the advantage versus the disadvantage of some of these projects moving forward. So it's just something to keep in mind. I have seen in the past, and we'll probably see it moving forward, with advocates like Commissioner Carter and Supervisor Alcorn, when even after we come to a vote, even if we couldn't bring full consensus to some of our issues, I do believe Commissioner Carter often has our back and Supervisor Alcorn has our back with furthering dialogue with applicants when they know there's still some loose ends. They know there's still outstanding issues. And so I just recommend that we take advantage of that in the future, because some of these are going to be hard decisions, and it's hard when to say, okay, I've seen at least enough for approval, but we still want to work with this applicant to move things forward. And it's just something to keep in mind. So, but with that, thank you, everybody. And thanks
Thank you,
for
Rob.
your patience with me
Thank
sometimes.
you very
but
much.
Thank you,
You're gonna
Robert.
be-
Thank you, Rob.
You're going to be in good hands.
Appreciate it.
Good luck in the future, Rob.
Yeah, and I'll still stay in touch. You'll still see me pop in from time to time. So.
Good.
Good.
Well, yeah, thank you to you and to Dick, and for 26 years. I mean, that's a long time to serve on a committee. So
It
much
is.
appreciated.
Well, thank you. And with that, I'm just going to officially adjourn us for the night. We don't even need to take a vote on it.
All right.
Thank you, Rob.
All right. Thanks, everybody.
Hey,
Thank you,
before
everybody.
we,
Good night.
before we do adjourn, are we sticking to our third Monday for February?
I think you need to move that to the fourth one because the third is a
President's
holiday.
Day.
Yes,
Yeah.
okay. So it's the 24th of February. Okay, thank you so much.
All right. And John, I'll get in touch with you with some
Sure.
information.
Yeah,
All
thanks,
right.
Rob. The
See you,
secret
everybody.
box.
Thank
Thank-
you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.